Good morning. My name is Johanna Keene, and I'm going to be reading our scripture this morning. So if you have your Bible, you can go ahead and turn. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. It will also be on the screens next to me, so you can follow along up there. So 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and we're going to be reading verses 25 through 31. Now concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned, and if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away.
All right, Johanna, thank you very much. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Dusty. I'm one of the pastors. Really glad that you're here. Also want to just give a special thank you to all that have served in armed forces over the years. Veterans Day was this weekend. Really thankful for all of you. So I'm really excited about this sermon today because we're working through 1 Corinthians, and we're going to be handling some of those verses that were read and a few others. And the topic today is going to be singleness, and I think this is a really unique voice that really needs to be said, not just as a little quick tack on to the thing on marriage, but like its own thing. And I'm hoping that this is going to be equally valuable to both singles that are here, especially for you, but also for folks that are married. That I think that there's something unique about this voice right here. And let me tell you why I think there's a really unique perspective that needs to be said. Is that I feel like that for singles, how we tend to view singleness is that it's for some either inherently negative, it's almost like a condition that needs to be cured. And then on the other hand, that there's a whole other side where it's positive, but for like totally the wrong reasons. So you've got these two things where it's either inherently negative or positive for the wrong reasons. And we're going to have to just kind of navigate that. There's going to be maybe some very different responses to what we're going to hear in God's word today that may cause like very different responses in good ways, I'm hoping. So first for singles, I want to talk about why it is that, why I think that this is a complex and important sermon for you, is that you probably have a very complex relationship with your singleness. You probably do. And by the way, if you're like, well, why are we having a sermon on single? For right now, for adult population in America, for the first time in our history, there's actually more single people than marrieds. That's never been true in our country's history. It's true now. And so there are some who are completely miserable as singles, would give almost anything to not be in that classification anymore, and really do feel like they've got a condition that they wish that there was a pill they could take that would like fix it, kind of thing, and carry maybe some shame around it. They go home to Thanksgiving and you're already dreading it when people are going to be like, have you met any boys? And you're like, I don't know if there's still boys when I'm 40, Mom, but but no, and whatever, that kind of thing. And like you're just like dreading, people setting you up all the time, all that kind of thing, even though you kind of want it to, whatever. I mean, like you dread it and you wish that you weren't, and there's a stigma, you're lonely, and then I'm going to go ahead and say it, there's not a like biblically allowed, like legal, biblically speaking, like sexual outlet, and you're like, everybody else that's married gets to, and here I am, and I'm stuck in this spot. So and so there's that inherently negative component for some of us where you just feel like it's a net negative for you. And but then there's others that there's like an entirely different kind of single that would be here today. Totally different experience though, where like marriage isn't even on your radar, And like even, you could see this in a lot of like what sometimes are called developing nations, or developed nations, like first world countries and all that, where birth rates are plummeting. And like you can look in like Western Europe, you can look in Japan, you can look in Russia, and honestly, like in a lot of places in the United States as well, that birth rates are declining rapidly because fewer and fewer people are getting married, or if they are, they're wanting to get a career established and work for 10 to 15 years, make a pile of money, and then maybe I'd be open to that later. But by that point, you're in your 30s or 40s, and lots of people are getting married and saying, I'm not sure if I even really want children at this point. And while we'll see in a second, could be beautiful, but for a lot of people, single for totally the wrong reasons. And it's that, man, I want to make my money. I want to establish my own kind of name and credibility in the world first. I want to go pursue all of those things, and I want to go where I don't want anybody saying that I can't go to the lease this weekend, can't go fishing, golfing, can't go on a girls' trip. I don't want anybody clipping my wings. I don't want anybody asking me about what I'm spending money on. I want to live my life. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I don't want to have to make room for another person. And so there are some of us that it's just that they're singles, and just bluntly, it is just a selfishness that you don't want anyone else to crowd out your lifestyle and doing what you want to do. And so therefore that you've choose singleness, but for the wrong reasons, like a very self-absorbed reasons. So, and then one last little wrinkle on singleness is there's not a one-size-fits-all single that would be present in this room today. You have some. You have younger singles, you have older singles, you have divorced singles, you've got widowed singles, you've got never married singles, you have a single that's 65 and widowed may feel a little different than being single and 25. And so there's a lot here in a lot of different circumstances. But then married people that, again, a lot of the same issues here that for a lot of you, when you have your single friends, that you almost can almost look at them with somewhere between pity of, poor thing, and we need to fix that like immediately. And like every time you're talking about who you could set them up with and if they met anybody and all that. Or even worse, where they're just invisible to you, where they're around you, but like you're not real interested in inviting them with you to a family meal or on a vacation, that you'll only do that with couples, and where singles can be invisible. And so married people can view their single friends as something either inherently negative or maybe even with envy and positive. You'd look at their singleness as positive, but maybe for the wrong reasons as well. So all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this and see. I'm going to dip back into verse 6 of 1 Corinthians 7 that Keenan talked last week on marriage, and marriage is beautiful. We even went to other passages that talk about this beautiful gospel picture of Christ and the church that's reflected in marriage, all these things, and it's talking about this, but it begins to address singleness here, and then we're going to fast forward into the last part of it, some of those sections that Johanna read. So verse 6, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 6. Now as a concession, not a command, I say this. And by the way, this is going to be the tone of a lot of Paul's teaching. He's a single, and that's really significant. That's a unique voice inspired by God. He's a single, and he's going to say, hey, look, this isn't like authoritative, but I think I've got some wisdom here, and I've got a few things to say, and I hope you'll hear me on it. So just consider it, is what he's saying. I wish that all were as I myself am, meaning single. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. So that's interesting. So Paul's perspective on singleness, he says it's good. He describes it as good, that it's not a condition that needs to be cured. It's a good thing. It can be a beautiful expression of faith and a beautiful expression of obedience and a deep devotion to the Lord. It can be that, and it's described as good. And verse 9, he continues on and says, but if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So again, you can even feel even the tone of this, where he's saying, hey, look, I think it'd be great if we all just were single, and you'll even hear in a moment why that's going to be, like this devotion to the Lord. But he says, but look, but I get it, that you may not feel like you can do that, and that either because of like sexual desires or loneliness, and there could be a lot of different reasons why someone would, and that's fine if you do, but he's actually describing being single as a good thing. So a couple of things on this before we move on, that I think it's really significant here, that I think in our culture right now, and it's actually fairly similar to the Corinthian culture, the context that Paul was writing into, that for a lot of us, like sex, sexuality, gender identity, sexual orientation, even expression of sexuality is like a first order issue that's almost to a level of like identity. Like it defines who it is that we are, and am I even living? And a lot of times we can pick up these cues from our culture that am I even living if I'm not expressing myself in these ways? And really what this is getting at into here is that no, that those things don't actually define you. That first of all, we do have a gender that's been assigned by God and all of that, but even in terms of your sexual attraction and expression, that doesn't like make you. This is not a primary issue that would be defining, but it could be a good thing to say that yes, I'm a male, yes, I'm a female, but I'm going to be single, and I'm going to entrust even my sexuality to the Lord because it's not primary. It's part of me, but it's not actually primary. And so he is saying that, hey, look, if you do want to marry, that's great. You should totally go do that. And by the way, one of the things that's always just killed me. I've been doing this for a long time, like both in college ministry, but now pastoring a church. Redeemer will be 16 years in January, so I've seen this a long time. One of the most mind-blowing things, this is a sermon about singleness. I've already told you it would be beautiful if you were to be single, but there's lots of you that don't want to be single forever. And one of the things that just kills me is that like I could give you, without even thinking, I could probably give you 15, 20, 25 names of single women in their 20s and 30s that are just incredible, like awesome. And I'm like, why is no one asking them on dates? Like, it just kills me. And like, Paul's like inviting us, almost like baiting you to say, look, if you want to be single, that'd be great. It'd be good. I wish you could do that. But if you know that's not you, then why don't you go ahead and get yourself out there and start moving towards a relationship? That would be good too. So this, I think, a fairly balanced sermon of what he's saying here on how we might engage our singleness, which is it's a good thing, but you might want to go ask somebody out too, and that'd be good. Like, where are you at on that? And so, and some of you, that might be like your biggest takeaway from this sermon is like, hey, I do want to be content in my singleness, but I need to go and ask a girl out. That'd be a really good start. So verse 25, thus saith the Lord on that. All right, verse 25. Now concerning the betrothed, and let me define that real quick. Betrothed means engaged. Like, that isn't a word that we usually use a lot. Like, you'd be like, hey, I'm betrothed to her. And you're like, easy, watch your mouth, boy, that kind of thing. But it's like, it just means engaged. And just so you know, too, it's different culturally that most of the time what would happen in this point would be you'd have arranged marriages. So you might have, a couple of dads get together and set up their 8-year-olds for someday they'd get married. You know what I mean? And there might be some advantages for them, what you would do. And I think there are a lot of parents in this room that are like, actually, this is a brilliant idea. Can we go back to that? I actually think I could do a great job picking my children's future spouses. They have not agreed with that down the line. But just imagine you're 8 years old and you'd see this little girl at neighborhood parties and be like, man, that's weird. I'm going to marry her someday. I don't know. But he's got some advice here to the concerning the betrothed. He again has that same tone of, I have no command from the Lord. So in other words, this is not like, here's what you ought to do, but he's got a voice that's interesting. He says, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. So he's saying here that, look, he's a single man, and he's got some things to say that I think are really interesting and a unique voice. And he's saying, hey, look, I've got a few things that this isn't a directive, but consider this wisdom from someone who's single and who's heard from the Lord and walked with the Lord a good bit. Verse 26, I think that in view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. So in other words, if you're single, to stay single. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. I'm just going to leave it right here that he says to be free from a wife. I'm just going to leave it right there. I think it's just funny language. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. So really what he's saying here, it's not as negative as it sounds, but he's saying, hey, look, are you single? Then you ought to give serious thought to staying single. And if you're married, then obviously you need to continue to be married and be committed to your spouse. And I would refer you back to the first part of 1 Corinthians 7 and Keenan's sermon last week, that again, singleness is not inherently negative, and it's not positive for the wrong reasons, that it could be a beautiful positive, both in your connection to God, as well as ministry and service to the church and mission among our city and even among the nations. Verse 28, but if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. So he's saying, hey, look, I think it'd be incredible if you were to stay single. But he's saying, look, yeah, of course you haven't sinned if you get married. Of course not. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. Here's going to be his main reason for why he's asking singles just to consider it. Here it is, verse 29. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as those who had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. He's going to get more clear about this in a second, but what he's saying is look, there's a beautiful gospel picture in marriage of a husband and a wife. It's a beautiful picture. Keenan talked about it last week, and it's one of the beautiful experiences of marriage is as Christ loves the church, a husband loves the wife, and there's this beautiful, self-denying, I'm going to give myself to this other person. There are some beautiful, sanctifying, growing experiences that are experienced uniquely in marriage that are incredible. But he's saying that, hey, on the flip side of this, though, that the time is short. Like, we're going to all live and die, and it's going to go so quickly. And like, how many times do you hear parents that are, like, I was just talking to some friends who are coming in who are like recently empty nested. And I'm like, how is it on that side of this whole thing? Like, I'm kind of scared of it. Tell me about it. And they're like, it's kind of sad and all this, and it's kind of awesome in a different way. And but like you just it all goes so quick. You're like raising toddlers, and next thing you know, we've got graduation announcements and that kind of thing. And then even beyond that, into retirement and beyond, that life goes really quick, time is short, and really the way that we live, marriage is not ultimate. And this is really important. Even if you are married, that marriage, in our culture right now, we tend to lift up family in some ways in a beautiful way, and sometimes in an idolatrous way with our children's activities, where really that is ultimate, is raising the child and marriage and sexual expression, that those things are ultimate. And he's saying, even if you are married, that yes, we're going to love and serve one another. Yes, we are going to raise children. And yes, we're going to do these things, but we're going to do those things knowing that time is short. And that ultimately, even a self-absorbed expression of that is not what we need to do as marrieds, much less as those who are singles, that the time is very short. And that Jesus would be the goal, Christ would be the goal, and it's a beautiful gospel picture. And I would just make a point that a single then can experience as much of God's nearness, even though they may not be getting to experience that in the context of marriage. They don't get to experience that, but you're about to see a unique devotion to the Lord and even capacity and time and focus that's available to you that some of your married friends don't have. That's the point he's about to make. All right, so let's keep moving now. Here's some of the unique challenges to marriage that honestly, like marrieds in this room, you'll be like, yeah, this is 100% accurate, what he's about to say right here. Verse 32. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried and betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you. Again, there's that tone. I'm just saying this. This is just wisdom, just some food for thought. Consider it. I'm not trying to lay any restraint on you, but to promote good order and to secure listen to this. This is the key phrase, your undivided devotion to the Lord. That's the goal. And even if you skip down to verse 38, so then he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage does even better. All right. So the undivided devotion to the Lord is the real goal here, and that he's saying that this is everything he's been saying up till now has been leading up to this point. That the main case he would make for someone to even intentionally choose to be single, whether that's for the next 2 years, the next 8 years, or for the rest of your life, is this undivided devotion. Because here's the practical reality. If you have a family, that necessarily what it means, the ticket to ride, if you have a family, is that I've got to make room for you, and we have different desires. And this is a shocker, but my wife Amy might not enjoy 8 hours of walking through a trout stream, fishing upstream, and backpacking, not showering for a week. Sounds incredible to me, but I'm gonna have to make room for her, and it's not just what I want, but even this passage goes beyond even like what hobbies you like. It's also even apart from, like, let's say a single could come home from work, because we all got to make a living. A single could come home from work and could spend extra time in prayer and Bible study, could spend extra time just praying for needs, could spend extra time being exceptionally and uniquely thoughtful for some of their friends that are going through things, and might call a friend that they know that's been going through a lot and bring something by for them. That their married friends with families have their hair on fire all the time and are like putting out fire after fire. Again, they've got some in their hair, so it's everywhere, and just trying to keep up with things. And they can have these moments of thoughtfulness and engagement and service with the church, with people they know, even unique access to non-believing friends, and the ability just to zoom in and be deliberate in that. There's this undivided devotion to the Lord that's much tougher whenever you're like, hey, I've got a spouse that has needs that I need to be attentive. Like, we probably can't be out 7 nights a week. We're going to need to pull back. All the introverts in the house are like, that's what I'm talking about. And we're going to have to pull back and preserve some family time. And then not to mention children. They've got their activities that they do. They need individual attention. They need time. We need time as a family. They have things they're a part of that we go and we have to drive them everywhere. It's like 3/4 of parenting is like being an Uber and all this. And so we've got all these things, and you got these other people's concerns. It's like what it means to be married, what it means to be a family. You can see the beautiful part of that. Again, Keenan talked about this last week, where like you're serving, you're constantly pouring yourself out. I'm going to serve my wife, and my wife's going to serve me, and then we're going to serve these children, and we're attentive to their needs, and we care about them, and we love them, and we should celebrate fatherhood. We should celebrate motherhood. So it's this beautiful expression here, but he's saying that, hey, look, though, that there's something unique, this undivided devotion to the Lord that a single can have. And so it's, on the one hand, it is addressing, for those of us that can feel like singleness is inherently negative, it's saying, no, it's not. You have an opportunity here. You have an incredible opportunity to have this undivided devotion to the Lord that a married person can't experience the depth of, and a unique opportunity to serve the church and to serve needs and to connect with people and that are really unique. It's really incredible to the person that feels like singleness is negative. I was listening to a good friend of mine who's delivering a sermon on this passage that I listened to kind of in preparation for this. And he made this point that he showed up to help someone move, a church member that was moving and leaving their church and moving to another city. And there's like 4 or 5 other kind of disgruntled like dads that showed up to help move. It's the right thing to do. Nobody had any time. No one wanted to be there, but they're helping them out, kind of thing. And he said then there's a single woman that was there who'd already been there for like 3 days, boxing up things, and like was labeling all the boxes, had done days of work with these people that come up after work, would come there and had made cookies for all these dudes that had showed up to kind of move the heavy stuff, and just like this extra thoughtfulness and extra service, this devotion to the Lord, even individually with the Lord, but also even in serving people's needs that were just extra thoughtful and unique. So to those who think that singleness is negative, that's addressed. But then notice what Paul also isn't saying here, because there are some singles in this room that are hearing this that are like, this is the best sermon ever. This is what I'm talking about. I don't want all that stuff, because this is exactly why I don't want marriage. I don't want all this. Is that, notice that what Paul isn't saying here is, hey, this is awesome. You can go be single, and you don't have to pay attention to anybody, and have to have conversation, and don't have to be being accountable to what you spend and how you save and what you give and what you do on the weekends, and being gone every other week somewhere or another and doing this and that, and don't have to answer to anybody, and anybody going to tell me nothing. And like that isn't where he's gone with this, is it? It's the whole point of singleness is not, hey, I don't have to pay attention to anybody, and I can just be all about me, and I can kind of have sex with who I want to have sex with, and disconnect that from the covenant of marriage, and meet those needs however I want to. That it's the exact opposite of that. It's this, hey, actually, I'm going to give myself away. I'm going to give myself away to the Lord. I'm going to be in an undivided way. I'm going to be devoted to the Lord and into ministry and into service. So I'm leveraging my singleness not for self-absorption, so this can be about me, but I'm leveraging my singleness to the glory of God. All of it. That's the whole point of it. Again, whether you are single for now, for a minute, or you're single for the rest of your life, that would be the reason why. It's undivided. He's not making a case for singleness to live more for ourselves, but more for Jesus. And I would actually make the case that's actually the point of marriage too. That if you are married, he already said this earlier, that yes, we're going to need to be attentive to our spouse, and yes, we're going to need to be attentive to our children, and yes, we're going to be giving ourselves away, but even all of that is to make disciples of these little ones and to throw our life into them, and even as a family, to be on mission together in our city and wherever God has placed us. So it's single for the Lord. So I've got 4 things to consider for Redeemer because of what we've heard today in regards to singleness that I would like for singles and marrieds to consider. So let me run through these things as points of application for all this. Number 1, singles, engage your singleness with intentionality. So this would mean that if you're single, some of us are so like you feel like your own singleness is negative. Not all of you do. But you feel like it's negative, is that you have this opportunity and you have space to not do extra Netflix binges and nobody can tell you not to kind of thing. And that's what you like about your singleness. But you have an opportunity to even have this extra connection with God. You have more space for it, more space for time to pray, to connect in God's word. You have extra space to be especially thoughtful in ministry in some of the ways we've already talked about. Extra capacity to serve that others might not have. Extra capacity for friendship that others might not have, and that you have this opportunity. And so, engage your singleness in an intentional way. And if some of you are single, but for the wrong reasons, that you love it because you don't like anybody telling you what to do and all the things we've already talked about, this is an opportunity for you to have a little bit of correction here about hey, well, okay, you're single, and perhaps there's even a sense of calling into this, but this isn't for you. Your singleness could be lived for the glory of God in an intentional way. And so whether you're single for a minute or single for a long time, there is just a beautiful ministry of devotion and thoughtfulness and care and even handling sexuality in its proper orbit and subordinating that to your devotion to the Lord, which is what this whole thing is expressing. Number 2, Redeemer is already, and I all capsed it, that's not me yelling at you, but I just wanted you to know how true it is that Redeemer is a way better church because of our singles. Just to put it to you straight, this church would not function very well without our singles. That honestly, a lot of families in here don't really have to serve in the kids area. I mean, we really should, but it's we've got loads and loads of college students and singles here that just serve the heck out of you as families, and it's we should probably be going out of our way to be thank you. That's not all who serves in our kids areas, because we got lots of folks here that serve. But in our worship ministry, in our connections, in our small groups, which we call gospel communities, that this church, it would be, if every single at this church just disappeared, you would feel it. You would feel it in a big, big way. That singles serve this church in a tremendous way. I also think about the how many singles we've sent over the years in the mission field and how effective they are. Again, but for the same reason, there's an undivided focus on the Lord, that they're not having to homeschool a kid and do some of these other things. It's they're learning language and they're sharing their faith. And we have had some of our most effective missionaries over the years have been singles. It doesn't mean families can't be, but there's, again, some unique voice and expression. I also think about unique ways that so many of our singles here have served people, that whenever I have other people's children that are part of our family for a night or a weekend or something like that, we just splice them into what we're doing, and we're all right, cool, you'll probably get some food along the way and that kind of thing, whatever we're doing. But sometimes when some of our singles have invested in our children here, they dote on them, pay special attention to them, and there's something unique and beautiful about the way that there's this unique ministry here. I also think there's this awesome model for devotion devotion that I have experienced, where you see this just clear-minded focus on the Lord, and where that their identity is firm, and whether they stay single their whole life. And I'm thinking of several that have never been married, that they're just, the chips are to the middle on a devotion to the Lord. And there may even be an openness that if the Lord were to bring someone along, and they may even have themselves out there in the dating world and trying to have conversations, but they are content in the Lord, and they're making a tremendous impact, and a model of devotion, service, even sexual fidelity, that all those things are in check. And I think about how many of the way that they've served, that is just beautiful. People like Jana and Cheryl and Pam and many others that have just served the Lord in a beautiful way that really encouraged me. I could give dozens and dozens of names like that. Number 3, Redeemer families. Include singles around you. All right, so here's the thing. This is where, like, if you're like, okay, this has been good to know, kind of theology of singleness. Thank you for that, but I'm married and I've got my hair on fire, as you mentioned. So here's the thing. I'm trying to think of the last time I've been involved in a gospel community and a single wasn't a part of it. All right, like singles have been part of every gospel community I've been a part of in a long time, and it's really easy for you just to kind of see your own. You're looking around for couples that, hey, we could go out and eat Friday night. Who we want to? Not her, not him. We can do the couple, and maybe even like threatened of like you're not going to go take the single out because you don't want her talking with your man or whatever, like something crazy like that. And not every single out there is a threat to your marriage or something like that, right? But these are human beings that have contributed a lot, that you have things to learn from. Their devotion to the Lord, their ministry, their service, their friendship would be a great benefit to you, and vice versa. Don't let the singles around us be invisible. Here's something that's interesting: is we had member meetings. We did 11 of them this fall. And one of the things that was interesting is these were long, so we had a lot of time to talk. And one of my favorite things I heard, and I heard it over and over again, people said, what is your favorite Redeemer moment? The thing that has meant the most to you of your time here? And I'm saying double-digit times that we had people say, you know what? It's the preaching. No, I'm kidding. They said that my most impactful thing was we've hosted Redeemer College gospel communities. And those relationships with those students is our favorite thing in this whole church. And these are like families that have their hair on fire with all the things, but like their relationship with single college students in this church has been enriching. Listen to this. Like, oh, that's cool. We provided a meal for them. Enriching to them to know singles in this way, that it's been incredibly beautiful. And that's not true just for college students, but singles of all kinds. I'm trying to think about, go ask Sammy Rhodes' gospel community about some of the singles that are widowed, divorced, that are part of that gospel community. And you go ask them how critical of a role that those people play in their small groups there. It'll blow your mind. Incredible. And I even think of like some other cool ones, like the Henleys, that Des has been living there for like a year and a half. Or maybe even longer than that. Like they go on family vacation, Des goes with them. And Des gets a lot out of that, but the Henleys would say that they get a lot out of that too. It's really beautiful. So fourth and finally, this is really just pulls so much of this together, is let's celebrate singles that are undivided in their devotion to the Lord, because that's really what we're all for here, right? So, and we also should celebrate marrieds who are undivided, even though you've got like a concern, you got to take care of each other's needs and you got family, but where there's a Godward orientation and you're going after the Lord as married and raising family, that's great. But I also think there needs to be a voice of singles that are like, man, my chips are to the middle. It's all about Jesus, that extra devotion, and even a subordination of sexual desires to say, yes, I'm a sexual being, they're there, but I'm subordinating those things to the glory of God, that Jesus is the most important thing. And maybe I would like a relationship, maybe I would not, but either way, it's going to be for Jesus. And I think it would be a beautiful thing if, when you know singles that have done this beautifully in a way that has enriched you spiritually, you should walk up to them and say, you've done this so well and so beautifully, and I just want you to know. It's meant a lot to me, and maybe even someone that's now married. And but the way that they handled I could think of someone that I see in this room right now that was single from the time I've known them, and they're married now, and they handled their singleness beautifully, honorably, in a God-glorifying way. So either way, that we'd be devoted to the Lord, and that's my deep desire for you. And even I'm hoping even that there'd be some of us here today that you don't really have a spiritual connection with God, and you realize that maybe you've wanted to be married or not. Maybe you are married and you're just kind of going through it. That Jesus is the goal for all of us here, and that there would be less of self, more of Christ. And that is really the bottom line. So I'm going to pray that would be true for all of us here. Lord, would you encourage singles that are here that maybe feel forgotten, feel second class, or maybe have enjoyed it for all the wrong reasons, that there would be a reorientation around your son Jesus, crucified and resurrected, and the grace of Jesus, and even that the cross would speak a beautiful word to them if they haven't handled it well. And to marrieds, that there would be a deep engagement as one body of Christ with our single friends, that they would be seen, honored, celebrated. Lord, thank you for them. What an incredible gift the singles of this church.